The shovel scraped against my driveway at exactly 6 in the morning, a sound I had grown accustomed to after 15 winters in Minneapolis. I had woken early to clear the 10 inches of fresh snow that had fallen overnight, knowing full well that I had a long day ahead of me at the city operations center. What I did not expect was the knock on my door 30 minutes later, followed by the flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the pristine white blanket covering my front yard. I leaned my shovel against the garage and walked toward the street where 2 patrol officers were stepping out of their vehicle. Behind them stood Patricia Morrison, the president of the Lakewood Estates Homeowners Association, wrapped in a purple parka with her arms crossed tightly against her chest. Her expression reminded me of someone who had just caught a burglar red-handed. "Officers, thank goodness you are here," Patricia said, her voice shrill in the quiet morning air. "This man has been violating our community noise ordinances for the last half hour. He knows very well that no outdoor maintenance is permitted before 7 in the morning on weekdays." I looked at the officers, then back at Patricia. Officer Jenkins, whose name tag I could read from where I stood, appeared uncomfortable. His partner, Officer Martinez, had her hand resting on her duty belt and looked like she would rather be anywhere else. "Good morning, officers," I said calmly. "I am Derek Richardson. I live here at 428 Maple Drive. I was just clearing my driveway before heading to work." "See, he admits it," Patricia interjected. "The HOA bylaws clearly state that no power equipment or repetitive noise-generating activities are permitted before 7 on weekdays or 8 on weekends. I have it right here." She pulled out a laminated card from her pocket and waved it triumphantly. Officer Jenkins scratched his head. "Madam, he is using a shovel. That is pretty standard winter maintenance." "A shovel scraping concrete is absolutely a repetitive noise," Patricia insisted. "And it woke up at least 3 of our residents who called me to complain." This is not the first time Mr. Richardson has flagrantly disregarded our community standards. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. The truth was that Patricia and I had been at odds since I moved into the neighborhood 5 years ago. She had cited me for leaving my garbage bins out 4 hours past collection time, for having a wreath on my door that was not pre-approved in color scheme, and for parking my work truck in my driveway overnight on 2 occasions when my garage was being used to store my daughter's college belongings during her summer break. "Officers, I apologize for any inconvenience," I began, "but I need to clear my driveway to get to work. I am the director of snow removal operations for the city of Minneapolis. If I do not get to the operations center soon, we will have serious delays in getting the plows out, which affects everyone in this city." Officer Martinez's eyes widened slightly. "You are Derek Richardson, from Public Works?" "Yes, madam." She turned to her partner. "Jenkins, this is the guy who organized that whole response plan last February during the blizzard. My sister lives on the east side, and she said the streets were clear within 12 hours. Patricia's face reddened. "I do not care if he is the President of the United States. The rules apply to everyone equally. That is the whole point of having a homeowners association. We maintain property values and quality of life by ensuring everyone follows the same standards." "Madam," Officer Jenkins said carefully, "I understand your concern, but this seems like something that could be resolved without police involvement. The man is shoveling snow at 6 in the morning because he has an important job that requires him to be at work early, especially on days like this." "Are you refusing to enforce the law?" Patricia's voice rose an octave. "This is not really a legal matter," Officer Martinez explained. "This is a civil HOA issue." If you believe Mr. Richardson violated your association's rules, you would need to follow your internal procedures, send him a formal notice, and potentially fine him according to your bylaws. We cannot arrest someone for shoveling snow. Patricia's jaw clenched. Fine. But I want this documented. I want a report filed that shows he was engaged in prohibited activity. The officers exchanged glances. Jenkins pulled out a notebook. We can make a note that we responded to a noise complaint and found a resident clearing snow from his property. But that is the extent of it. I checked my watch. It was now 6:45, and I was supposed to be at the operations center by 7:30 at the latest. We had over 150 plow trucks that needed to be deployed across the city, and as the director, I needed to coordinate routes, monitor weather updates, and ensure that emergency corridors were prioritized. If we are done here, I really need to finish and get going, I said. Patricia stepped forward, blocking my path back to the driveway. We are not done. I am also citing you for unauthorized vehicle parking. That truck in your driveway is clearly over the weight limit specified in our covenants. She pointed at my Ford F-250, which had a small city emblem on the door. It was my assigned work vehicle, one I occasionally drove home when I was on call for weather emergencies. That is a city vehicle, I explained. And I am on call for winter weather events, which means I am required to have reliable transportation available at all times. The covenants do not make exceptions for work vehicles, Patricia shot back. Residential driveways are for standard passenger vehicles only. Commercial vehicles, trucks with multiple axles, and anything with business signage must be parked in the garage or not on the property at all. Officer Martinez cleared her throat. Madam, that is definitely a civil matter. We really cannot get involved in HOA parking disputes. Then I want to file a criminal trespassing complaint, Patricia said suddenly. That city truck is parked on community property without authorization. I felt my patience wearing thin. It is parked in my driveway, on my property. According to our master deed, all driveways are considered common elements maintained by individual homeowners, but owned collectively by the association, Patricia said, pulling out another laminated document. Therefore, parking a non-compliant vehicle on a common element without HOA approval constitutes unauthorized use of community property. Officer Jenkins closed his notebook. Madam, I strongly suggest you take this up with your HOA board and Mr. Richardson directly. This is way beyond what we can address. If you keep calling us for civil matters, you could be cited for misuse of emergency services. Patricia's face turned an impressive shade of crimson. How dare you threaten me? I am a taxpayer, and I have every right to call the police when laws are being broken in my community. No laws are being broken, Officer Martinez said firmly. Have a good morning, Mr. Richardson. Try to stay warm out there today. The officers returned to their patrol car and drove away, leaving me alone with Patricia on the snowy street. The sky was beginning to lighten, streaks of pink and orange appearing above the houses. This is not over, Patricia said coldly. I am calling an emergency HOA board meeting for tonight. I expect you to attend and answer for your repeated violations. I will be working, I replied. When we get this much snow, I am typically at the operations center until at least 9 or 10 at night, sometimes later. That is not my problem. If you are not there, we will proceed without you and the fines will be assessed automatically. She turned and marched back toward her house 3 doors down. I finished shoveling my driveway in frustrated silence, threw the shovel in the garage and climbed into my truck. The engine started with a reliable rumble, and I backed out onto the street. As I drove past Patricia's house, I saw her standing at her window, watching me with her phone pressed to her ear. No doubt she was already rallying the HOA board members for her evening meeting. The drive to the operations center normally took 20 minutes, but with the snow still coming down and the roads not yet fully treated, it took me nearly 40 minutes. When I arrived, my assistant director, Mike Chen, was already coordinating with the shift supervisors. "Morning, Derek," Mike called out as I entered the main operations room. "We have got all crews deployed except for District 7. Their supervisor called in sick." "Get Thompson to cover it," I said, shaking snow off my jacket. "What is the forecast looking like? Should taper off by noon." "Total accumulation around 12 inches. We have already got the primary routes at 80% clear, working on secondary streets now." I spent the next hour reviewing route maps, taking calls from the mayor's office, and coordinating with the Minnesota Department of Transportation about highway conditions. The city of Minneapolis covered over 54 square miles with over 800 miles of streets to maintain. During a major snow event, it was an orchestration of machinery, manpower, and strategic planning that most residents never thought about. They just expected their streets to be clear when they needed to drive to work or take their kids to school. Around 9 in the morning, my desk phone rang. The caller ID showed it was from City Hall, extension 3341. That was the city attorney's office. "Richardson," I answered. "Derek, this is Jennifer Walsh from legal. I just got a very strange call from a Patricia Morrison. She claims you are violating some homeowner association rules and that you used your position with the city to intimidate police officers this morning." I rubbed my temples. "That is not exactly accurate." I explained the morning's events in detail. Jennifer listened without interrupting. "Okay," she said when I finished. "So she called the cops on you for shoveling snow. The cops told her it was a civil matter, and now she is claiming you are abusing your authority. That about sums it up." "Do you want me to send her a letter explaining that you are entitled to clear your own driveway?" Jennifer asked. I could hear the amusement in her voice. "No, that will just escalate things. Patricia lives for confrontation. I will deal with it." "Well, if she keeps calling and making false claims about city employees, we might need to get involved. Keep me posted." I hung up and tried to focus on work, but the situation nagged at me. Patricia had been a thorn in my side for years, but this felt different. She was not just being petty about decorative mailbox colors or lawn height. She was actively interfering with my ability to do my job, and by extension, the city's ability to maintain safe roads during winter weather. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my neighbor, Tom Patterson, who lived directly next door. "Heads up. Patricia is going door to door collecting signatures for some kind of petition against you. She is telling people you are a danger to the community." I texted back a thank you and tried to push it out of my mind. I had more pressing concerns. A jackknife semi on Interstate 35W was blocking 2 lanes. Several elderly residents in South Minneapolis were calling about not being able to get out of their driveways, and we were getting reports of black ice forming on bridges as temperatures dropped. The day passed in a blur of phone calls, radio communications, and monitoring weather radar. Mike and I grabbed sandwiches from the vending machine for lunch and ate while reviewing equipment maintenance logs. 2 of our older plows had mechanical issues and needed to be pulled from service, which meant redistributing coverage areas for the remaining trucks. At 6:30 that evening, my phone rang again. This time it was my ex-wife, Rachel. "Derek, I just got a call from some HOA lady saying there is a meeting tonight about you being evicted from the neighborhood. What is going on?" Evicted is a strong word. "It is a long story, Rachel. Why is she calling you?" She said she was notifying all relevant parties. I told her we have been divorced for 3 years and I live in St. Paul, but she insisted I should know that our daughter's father is causing problems in his community. I felt anger rising in my chest. She contacted you to tell you that. That is completely inappropriate. I agree. But seriously, what is happening? I gave Rachel the abbreviated version of the morning's confrontation. She listened and then laughed. Only you would get the cops called on you for being too responsible. Are you going to this meeting? I cannot. I am stuck here until at least 9. We still have crews out and I need to monitor the overnight forecast. There might be freezing rain after midnight. Well, good luck. And Derek, do not let this HOA person push you around. You are one of the most considerate neighbors anyone could ask for. I remember you used to help that elderly couple next door with their yard work all the time. The Hendersons. They moved to Arizona 2 years ago. Right. Anyway, you are a good guy. Do not forget that. We said goodbye and I returned my attention to the operations center. But at 7:15, my phone started buzzing with text messages. Tom Patterson again. This meeting is insane. Patricia is saying you threatened her this morning and that you used your government position to avoid consequences. She has got about 20 people here and they are eating it up. Another message. She is proposing a special assessment of $5,000 for your violations and says if you don't pay within 30 days you will face foreclosure proceedings. Then, someone just asked if you were even a real city employee or if that was a lie. Patricia said she would not be surprised if you were impersonating a public official. I stared at my phone in disbelief. This had gone from annoying to potentially damaging my reputation. If Patricia was spreading lies about my employment and suggesting I was impersonating a government official, that could have serious ramifications beyond just HOA politics. I called Jennifer Walsh's cell phone. She answered on the 3rd ring. Jennifer, sorry to bother you in the evening. But the situation with that HOA president has escalated. I read her the text messages from Tom. She was quiet for a moment. Derek, if she is making false statements about your employment and accusing you of impersonating an official, that could be defamation. And if she is threatening foreclosure over bogus violations, that might constitute harassment or extortion depending on how far she takes it. What should I do? Document everything. Save those texts, get copies of any HOA communications, and if anyone at that meeting is willing to give you a statement about what was said, that would be helpful. For now, focus on your job. But if this continues, we might need to take legal action to protect both you and the city's reputation. At 8 o'clock, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mr. Richardson, this is Brenda Kowalski. I am on the HOA board for Lakewood Estates. I wanted to call you directly because I think you should know what happened at tonight's meeting. I am listening. Patricia made a lot of very serious accusations. She claimed you have been using city resources for personal benefit, that you intimidated police officers, and that you represent a liability to the community. She showed photos of your truck in your driveway and said it was proof you were violating multiple covenants. Then she proposed that the board levy immediate fines totaling $5,000 and begin foreclosure proceedings if not paid within 30 days. Can she actually do that? I asked. Technically, the board has the authority to assess fines for covenant violations, but the amounts are supposed to be reasonable and proportional. Most fines in our community are between $50 and $200. $5,000 is excessive, and several of us said so. But Patricia insisted you had been violating rules for years, and this was about establishing that no one is above the HOA standards. What was the outcome? The vote was 4-3 in favor of the fines. I voted against it, along with 2 others. But Patricia has allies on the board who go along with whatever she says. Here is the thing, though, Mr. Richardson. I did some research after the meeting. Our bylaws require written notice of violations before any fines can be assessed. You should have received a formal letter describing each violation and been given 30 days to correct the issues before any penalties are imposed. Patricia did not do that. She just went straight to calling the police and then proposing fines. So the vote is not valid. I do not think so. But I am not a lawyer. What I can tell you is that several of us on the board are very uncomfortable with how Patricia is handling this. She has always been strict about the rules, but this feels personal and vindictive. I wanted you to know that you have support in the community, even if it might not seem like it right now. I thanked Brenda for calling and for her honesty. After we hung up, I forwarded her contact information to Jennifer Walsh with a note explaining the situation. The rest of the evening passed without incident. The snow had stopped by 9 o'clock, and the overnight crews were handling the final cleanup of residential streets. I left the operations center at 9:45 and drove home through quiet, well-plowed roads. When I pulled into my driveway, I found a notice taped to my front door. It was an official letter from the Lakewood Estates Homeowners Association, signed by Patricia Morrison as president. The letter outlined 7 alleged violations: unauthorized snow removal during prohibited hours, parking of commercial vehicle in driveway, failure to obtain approval for door wreath colors, garbage bins visible from street for more than 2 hours post-collection, lawn height exceeding 2½ inches in summer months, unauthorized window covering visible from exterior, and general disregard for community standards. The total fines proposed: $5,200, due within 30 days or face foreclosure proceedings. I sat in my truck reading the letter twice, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Some of these violations were from years ago. The window covering complaint referred to blackout curtains I had installed in my bedroom when I was working night shifts 3 years prior. The lawn height violation was from a summer when I was recovering from knee surgery and had hired a neighborhood kid to mow my lawn, who apparently missed a week. This was not about maintaining community standards. This was Patricia Morrison trying to force me out of the neighborhood. I took photos of the letter and emailed them to Jennifer Walsh, even though it was nearly 10 at night. Then I went inside, made myself a sandwich, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow was Saturday, which meant another early morning checking on overnight road conditions, but at least I would not have Patricia waiting to call the cops on me for shoveling. The next morning, I woke at 5:30 and checked my email. Jennifer had responded at midnight. Derek, this letter is problematic on multiple levels. First, she is attempting to fine you for conduct from years ago, which likely exceeds any statute of limitations in your HOA bylaws. Second, she has not followed proper notice and cure procedures. Third, the amounts are grossly disproportionate to standard HOA fines. And fourth, threatening foreclosure is extremely aggressive and possibly illegal without following proper legal procedures. I am going to recommend that the city send a formal letter to your HOA board. This has gone beyond a personal dispute and is now affecting a city employee's ability to perform critical public safety functions. Expect a call from me Monday morning. I made coffee and looked out my front window at the quiet street. It was Saturday morning and most of my neighbors were probably still asleep. I had the day off unless there was an emergency, which was rare. Once the initial storm response was complete, my phone rang. It was Mike Chen. Sorry to bother you on your day off, boss, but we have got a situation. The mayor's office just got a complaint from someone named Patricia Morrison, claiming that city snow plows deliberately piled snow at the end of her driveway in retaliation for an HOA dispute. She is saying it is an abuse of power, and she is threatening to go to the media. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. Mike, the plows pile snow at the end of every driveway on every street in the city. That is how snow removal works. It is not retaliation, it is physics. I know that, you know that, but apparently Miss Morrison does not know that. The mayor's communications director wants you to call her. I spent the next hour on the phone with various city officials explaining the situation. Yes, I lived in the same neighborhood as the complainant. Yes, we had an ongoing HOA dispute. No, I had nothing to do with where the snow ended up at the end of her driveway. Yes, this was becoming a pattern of harassment. By 10 in the morning, I was exhausted and frustrated. I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood to clear my head. The subdivision was beautiful after a fresh snow, with mature trees lining the streets and well-maintained homes set back on large lots. I had moved here because it was a safe, quiet community with good neighbors and reasonable HOA rules. Or at least, that is what I thought. As I walked past Patricia's house, I saw her in her front window, phone pressed to her ear, watching me. When she saw me notice her, she quickly closed the curtains. 2 houses down, I ran into Tom Patterson, who was outside building a snowman with his 2 young kids. "Hey, Derek," Tom called out. "How are you holding up?" "Been better," I admitted. "Thanks for keeping me updated last night. That meeting was something else, man. Patricia was on a warpath. She had this whole PowerPoint presentation with photos of your house, your truck, everything. She made it sound like you were running some kind of criminal operation out of your garage." He lowered his voice so his kids would not hear. Most of the people there were just confused. I think she only got support because she framed it as being about fairness and rules applying to everyone equally. If people knew the full story, I do not think they would side with her. "What is the general feeling in the neighborhood?" I asked. Tom shrugged. "Honestly, most people do not care. They pay their HOA dues, follow the basic rules, and ignore Patricia when she gets on one of her crusades. But she has got a few allies who seem to think any deviation from the covenants is a threat to property values. Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Carlson, that guy with the golf cart who lives on the corner. Jeff Maloney. Yeah, him. Those 4 seem to be Patricia's core group. Everyone else just wants to live their lives." We chatted for a few more minutes before his kids demanded his attention for snowman construction. I continued my walk, thinking about what Tom said. Patricia had a small but vocal group of supporters. The rest of the neighborhood was either neutral or quietly opposed to her tactics, but unwilling to speak up. When I got back home, there was another car parked in front of my house. A woman I did not recognize was taking photos of my property with her phone. When she saw me approaching, she quickly got in her car and drove away. I managed to get a photo of her license plate before she turned the corner. This was getting out of hand. Monday morning arrived with clear skies and temperatures in the low 20s. I got to the operations center early and found Jennifer Walsh waiting in my office. "Good morning," she said. "I wanted to catch you before the day got busy. I spoke with the city attorney over the weekend, and we have decided to take action regarding Miss Morrison and your HOA. We are sending a formal cease and desist letter to the board, specifically addressing the harassment, the improper fine procedures, and the false complaints being made to city offices." "Will that just make things worse?" I asked. "Possibly in the short term. But we need to establish boundaries here. She is interfering with a city employee's ability to perform his duties. making false reports to police and city officials, and engaging in what appears to be targeted harassment. That is not acceptable, regardless of what HOA rules she thinks she is enforcing. Jennifer handed me a folder. This is a copy of the letter we are sending. It goes out today via certified mail. I have also reached out to a few attorneys who specialize in HOA law. If Miss Morrison does not back down, we might need to explore a restraining order or even file a lawsuit on your behalf. I read through the letter. It was professionally worded but firm, explaining that the city took seriously any attempts to harass or intimidate its employees, and that the HOA's actions appeared to violate both their own bylaws and potentially state law regarding proper notice and proportional penalties. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate the city backing me up on this. You are a valued employee, Derek, and more importantly, you have not done anything wrong. You cleared snow from your driveway so you could get to work and coordinate a city-wide emergency response. That is exactly what we want our directors to do." The next few days were relatively quiet. I focused on my work, which included preparing the snow removal budget for the next fiscal year, meeting with equipment vendors about replacing aging plow trucks, and conducting a post-storm review with my team. On Thursday afternoon, I received a call from Officer Martinez, one of the officers who had responded to Patricia's initial complaint. "Mr. Richardson, I wanted to give you a heads up. Miss Morrison has filed 3 more complaints about you since Saturday. One claiming you deliberately spray snow onto her property with your truck. One saying you are conducting illegal business operations from your home, and one alleging that you made threatening gestures toward her during a walk around the neighborhood." "That last one is completely false," I said. "I did walk around the neighborhood on Saturday morning, but I never even spoke to her." "I figured as much. Here is the thing. My sergeant is getting tired of responding to what appear to be frivolous complaints. If Miss Morrison keeps calling with false reports, she could be cited for misuse of emergency services. I wanted to let you know in case she tries to claim that we are not taking her complaints seriously. We are documenting everything, but we also have actual crimes and emergencies to respond to." I thanked her and hung up, feeling both vindicated and concerned. Patricia was escalating rather than backing down. That evening, I received a call from Brenda Kowalski, the HOA board member who had reached out before. "Mr. Richardson, I wanted to inform you that 3 of us on the board have requested a special meeting to review the fines that were levied against you. We believe Patricia overstepped her authority and did not follow proper procedures. The meeting is scheduled for next Tuesday at 7 in the evening at the community clubhouse. I hope you can attend." "I will make sure I am there," I said. "Thank you for pushing for this. Several of us are actually quite upset about how this has been handled. Patricia has been president for 6 years, and she has done some good things for the community. But lately, she seems more interested in punishing people than maintaining standards. You are not her first target, just the most recent. That was an interesting piece of information. Has she done this to other residents? The Hendersons, actually, the elderly couple who used to live next door to you. Patricia cited them repeatedly for their lawn care and for leaving their garage door open during the day. She tried to fine them almost $2,000. They ended up selling their house and moving rather than deal with it. It was really sad. I remembered the Hendersons. They were a sweet couple in their 80s who always waved and asked about my daughter. I had helped them with snow removal and yard work occasionally. I had no idea Patricia had driven them out of the neighborhood. That is terrible, I said. It is, and there have been others. Not as extreme, but Patricia seems to enjoy wielding power over people. Some of us think she should step down as president, but she has enough support that removing her would be difficult. We talked for a few more minutes before ending the call. I spent the evening researching HOA law in Minnesota, reading through my association's bylaws, and preparing for Tuesday's meeting. The weekend passed without incident. I spent Saturday supervising some maintenance work at the operations center, and Sunday visiting my daughter Stephanie at the University of Minnesota, where she was a junior studying environmental science. I told her about the HOA situation, and she laughed. "Dad, only you would end up in a war with a homeowners association for doing your job too well. This is the most on-brand thing I have ever heard." "I am glad you find it amusing," I said, but I was smiling. Stephanie had her mother's sense of humor and her ability to find lightness in frustrating situations. Monday brought another snowstorm, a smaller one this time, only 4 inches. I spent the day coordinating crews and monitoring conditions. By early evening, most primary routes were clear, and we were making good progress on residential streets. Tuesday evening, I arrived at the Lakewood Estates Community Clubhouse at 6:45. The building was a small facility with a meeting room, a kitchenette, and a fitness area. About 30 people were already there, seated in folding chairs facing a table where the HOA board members sat. Patricia was at the center of the table, wearing a navy blue blazer and a tight expression. When she saw me enter, her jaw clenched, but she said nothing. I took a seat in the back row next to Tom Patterson, who gave me an encouraging nod. At exactly 7 o'clock, Patricia called the meeting to order. "We are here tonight to address a special appeal regarding fines assessed against Derek Richardson of 428 Maple Drive. Mr. Richardson's violations of our community covenants have been documented extensively, and the board voted to levy appropriate penalties. However, some board members have questioned the procedures used. We will hear from both sides, and then the board will vote on whether to uphold or modify the fines." Brenda Kowalski raised her hand. "Before we begin, I would like to note for the record that the fines were assessed without proper written notice as required by our bylaws. Section 12, Paragraph 4 states that residents must receive written notification of violations and be given 30 days to cure before any fines can be imposed. That did not happen in this case." Patricia's face reddened. "Mr. Richardson has been violating rules for years. He has had ample opportunity to comply. That is not the same as following our required procedures," another board member, a man named George Fletcher, said. "If we do not follow our own rules, we open ourselves to legal liability." "Fine," Patricia snapped. "Let's hear from Mr. Richardson." "I am sure he has a lot of excuses." I stood and walked to the front of the room. I had prepared notes, but I decided to speak from the heart instead. "Thank you for allowing me to address the board. I have lived in this community for 5 years. I work as the Director of Snow Removal Operations for the City of Minneapolis, which means I am responsible for coordinating the removal of snow from over 800 miles of city streets during winter weather events. This is a critical public safety function that requires me to be available on short notice, especially during major storms. 2 weeks ago, on the morning of our most recent significant snowfall, I woke early to clear my driveway so I could get to work. I used a hand shovel, as I always do. I did this at 6 o'clock in the morning because I needed to be at the operations center by 7:30 to coordinate over 150 plow trucks across the city. Miss Morrison called the police on me for violating a noise ordinance. The officers explained to her that this was not a criminal matter and that I was not breaking any laws. Since then, Miss Morrison has filed multiple false police reports about me, called my employer to make baseless complaints, contacted my ex-wife to spread rumors, and assessed $5,000 in fines for violations that either do not exist, are years old, or were never properly noticed according to your own bylaws. I am not asking for special treatment. I am asking to be treated fairly. If I have violated HOA rules, I should be notified in writing, given an opportunity to correct the issues, and then fined reasonably if I fail to comply. That is what your bylaws require. That is not what happened here. I love this neighborhood. I have good neighbors, my home is here, and I have no desire to leave or to be in conflict with anyone. But I also cannot allow myself to be harassed and targeted simply because Miss Morrison has decided she does not like me. I returned to my seat. The room was silent. Patricia stood, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Everything I have done has been to protect this community and maintain our standards. Mr. Richardson seems to think that because he has an important job, he should not have to follow the same rules as everyone else. But that is exactly the kind of attitude that erodes neighborhoods. If we let one person ignore the rules, soon everyone will. Property values will decline, standards will slip, and before you know it, this community will look like any other run-down suburb. Brenda raised her hand again. With all due respect, Patricia, clearing snow from your driveway at 6 in the morning is not going to erode property values. Mr. Richardson has maintained his property well. He is a good neighbor, and he contributes to this community. The only problem here is that you have taken a personal dislike to him and are using your position to punish him for it. How dare you? Patricia's voice rose. I have served this community faithfully for 6 years. I have enforced the rules equally and fairly for everyone. Then why did the Hendersons leave? Another voice called out from the audience. It was an older woman I recognized as Mrs. Chen from 2 streets over. They told me you made their lives miserable with constant complaints and fines. They loved this neighborhood, but you drove them away. Patricia pointed at the woman. The Hendersons refused to maintain their property to community standards. I gave them multiple chances to comply. They were in their 80s. Mrs. Chen shot back. And you cited them for leaving their garage door open during the day. What kind of petty nonsense is that? The room erupted into multiple conversations, people arguing and debating. Patricia banged her gavel on the table repeatedly, trying to restore order. Finally, George Fletcher stood up. He was a tall man with gray hair and a calm demeanor that commanded attention. The room gradually quieted. I have been on this board for 3 years, George said, and I have watched our HOA become more about punishment than community. We have forgotten that the purpose of a homeowners association is to maintain common areas, preserve property values through reasonable standards, and create a pleasant place to live. It is not to wage personal vendettas or fine people into submission. Mr. Richardson is right. We did not follow our own procedures. We assessed fines without proper notice, without allowing time to cure, and in amounts far beyond what is reasonable or customary. More than that, several of us have witnessed Miss Morrison engage in what can only be described as harassment toward Mr. Richardson over the past 2 weeks. I am making a motion that all fines against Mr. Richardson be rescinded immediately, and that this board issue a formal apology for the improper handling of this matter. Furthermore, I am calling for a vote of no confidence in Patricia Morrison as HOA president. The room went completely silent. Patricia looked like she had been slapped. You cannot do that, she said, her voice shaking. You need 2/3 of the board to call for a vote of no confidence. I second the motion, Brenda said immediately. I third it, said another board member, a younger woman named Ashley Brennan. George looked around the table. That is 3 out of 7 board members. We need one more. A man at the end of the table, someone I did not recognize, slowly raised his hand. I support the motion. Patricia stood frozen, her face pale. This is a coup. You are all conspiring against me because you do not have the courage to enforce standards. No, George said firmly. We are holding you accountable for abusing your position. There is a difference. The vote was held. The motion to rescind the fines passed 6-1 with only Patricia voting against it. The vote of no confidence passed 5-2. Patricia grabbed her papers and her purse. Fine. You want to run this community into the ground. Go ahead. But do not come crying to me when property values tank and the neighborhood becomes a free-for-all. She stormed out of the clubhouse, slamming the door behind her. The room erupted in applause and conversation. George looked exhausted but relieved. He called the meeting back to order. We will need to elect an interim president until our next annual meeting. But for tonight, I think we have accomplished what we needed to. Mr. Richardson, on behalf of the board, I apologize for how you were treated. It was inappropriate and unprofessional. I nodded, accepting the apology. Several neighbors came up to shake my hand and express their support as the meeting broke up. Tom Patterson clapped me on the shoulder. Never a dull moment in Lakewood Estates, he said with a grin. I drove home feeling a weight lifted off my shoulders. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed that the mailbox across the street had a small sign that read, "We support you, Derek," with a smiley face. My next-door neighbor, an elderly widow named Mrs. Patterson, had left it. Over the next few days, life returned to normal. I went to work, coordinated snow removal operations, attended meetings, and came home to a peaceful neighborhood. The HOA board elected George Fletcher as interim president, and he sent out an email to all residents apologizing for the recent turmoil and promising a return to reasonable governance. But Patricia was not done. 3 weeks after the board meeting, I received a certified letter from an attorney representing Patricia Morrison. The letter accused me of defamation, harassment, and using my position with the city to orchestrate a conspiracy against her. It demanded a formal apology and $10,000 in damages. I forwarded the letter to Jennifer Walsh, who called me within an hour. "This is absurd," she said. "Everything you said at that meeting was truthful and relevant to the proceedings. You have every right to defend yourself against improper HOA actions, and the claim that you conspired with the city is baseless. I will draft a response from our office. Do not communicate with her attorney directly." The next day, Jennifer sent a strongly worded letter explaining that the city stood behind me, that no defamation had occurred, and that if Miss Morrison continued to make false claims and threats, we would pursue legal action against her for harassment and abuse of process. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. 2 weeks later, on a Friday evening, I was at home making dinner when I heard shouting outside. I looked out my front window and saw Patricia standing in the middle of the street, yelling at my house. She appeared to be recording herself with her phone. "Derek Richardson is a fraud and a bully," she shouted. "He used his government connections to destroy my reputation and turn this community against me. He is a public menace and everyone needs to know the truth." Several neighbors came out of their houses, watching in confusion and concern. Tom Patterson approached Patricia cautiously. "Patricia, you need to calm down," he said. "You are disturbing the whole neighborhood." "Get away from me," Patricia snapped. "You are all part of it. You are all in on the conspiracy." I called 911 and reported that a former HOA president was having some kind of episode in the street and appeared to be experiencing a mental health crisis. The dispatcher said they would send officers. Within 10 minutes, a patrol car arrived. It was Officer Martinez again. She approached Patricia, who was still shouting and recording. "Madam, I need you to calm down," Officer Martinez said. "You are creating a disturbance. I have every right to be here. This is my neighborhood too, and I am going to expose what this man has done." A second patrol car arrived and Officer Jenkins stepped out. Between the two officers, they managed to calm Patricia down enough to have a conversation. I stayed inside my house, watching from the window. After about 20 minutes, Patricia finally left, getting into her car and driving away. Officer Martinez came to my door. "Mr. Richardson, we are going to file a report about this incident. If Miss Morrison continues to harass you or create disturbances, we can pursue charges for disorderly conduct or harassment. I strongly suggest you consider getting a restraining order." "I was hoping it would not come to that," I said. "I understand. But this behavior is escalating. She has gone from calling in complaints to showing up at your house and making a scene. That is a concerning pattern." After the officers left, several neighbors came over to check on me. Mrs. Chen brought me a plate of cookies. Tom Patterson offered to install a security camera on my front porch. I thanked them all and assured them I was fine. That night, I called Jennifer Walsh at home. "I think we need to file for a restraining order," I said. "This has gone beyond HOA disputes. Patricia is not thinking clearly, and I am worried about what she might do next." "I agree," Jennifer said. "I will contact the city attorney first thing Monday morning. We will file on behalf of you personally, and the city will support the action." Monday morning, I met with a lawyer who specialized in harassment and restraining orders. Her name was Amanda Foster, and the city had retained her to represent me. We spent 2 hours going through every incident, every document, every text message and email. Amanda took detailed notes and asked probing questions. "You have an extremely strong case," she said. "Miss Morrison has engaged in a pattern of harassment that is well documented and has escalated over time. The fact that she showed up at your home shouting accusations while recording herself suggests she is not stable and poses a potential threat." "I do not think she would physically hurt me," I said. "But I do think she is obsessed with proving she was right and I was wrong." "Obsession can be dangerous," Amanda said. "Even if she does not intend physical harm, her behavior is disruptive and threatening. We will file for an order for protection. The hearing should be scheduled within 2 weeks." The paperwork was filed that afternoon. Patricia was served with notice of the restraining order petition 2 days later. According to the process server, she accepted the documents calmly and without comment. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday at 1 in the afternoon. I took a half-day off work and met Amanda at the Hennepin County Courthouse. Patricia arrived with her attorney, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s named Judge Sandra Peterson. She reviewed the documents, listened to Amanda's opening statement, and then turned to Patricia's attorney. "Does your client dispute any of the facts as presented in the petition?" Judge Peterson asked. Patricia's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges that there have been disputes with Mr. Richardson regarding homeowner association matters. However, she maintains that her actions were taken in good faith as the president of the HOA and were within her authority. She denies engaging in harassment and believes that this restraining order petition is itself a form of retaliation. Good faith does not include calling the police repeatedly with false reports," Judge Peterson said dryly. "Nor does it include showing up at someone's home to shout accusations while recording yourself. Miss Morrison, do you have anything to say?" Patricia stood. Her attorney tried to touch her arm, but she shook him off. "Your Honor, I have served my community faithfully for 6 years. I have upheld standards and protected property values. Mr. Richardson came into our neighborhood and immediately began violating rules, ignoring standards, and undermining the authority of the HOA. When I tried to address these issues through proper channels, he used his government position to intimidate me and turn people against me. Everything I did was to protect the community. Judge Peterson looked at her for a long moment. Miss Morrison, I have reviewed the police reports, the HOA meeting minutes, and the testimony from multiple witnesses. What I see is a pattern of behavior on your part that goes well beyond enforcing homeowner association rules. You have filed false police reports, made defamatory statements, contacted Mr. Richardson's family and employer with baseless accusations, and created a public disturbance outside his home. Regardless of your intentions or your belief in your authority, your conduct constitutes harassment under Minnesota law. Mr. Richardson has a right to live in his home without being subjected to this treatment. Patricia's face crumpled. But I was just doing my job. I was protecting the community. Your job as HOA president does not give you the right to harass a resident, Judge Peterson said firmly. The restraining order is granted. Miss Morrison, you are prohibited from contacting Mr. Richardson directly or indirectly, from coming within 100 feet of his home or workplace, and from making any public statements about him or posting about him on social media. This order is effective immediately and will remain in place for 2 years. Violation of this order will result in criminal charges. Do you understand? Patricia nodded silently, tears streaming down her face. As we left the courtroom, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. I had never wanted things to go this far. All I had wanted was to clear my driveway and go to work. Amanda walked with me to the parking garage. The order is enforceable by police. If she violates it, call 911 immediately. Keep copies of the order in your car, at home, and at your office. Thank you for your help, I said. You are welcome. And Derek, you did nothing wrong. You have every right to defend yourself against this kind of treatment. I drove back to work and tried to focus on budget reports and equipment requisitions. But my mind kept drifting back to Patricia crying in the courtroom. She had genuinely believed she was doing the right thing, protecting her community from someone who did not respect the rules. Somewhere along the way, that belief had twisted into an obsession that cost her the respect of her neighbors and her position of authority. Life gradually returned to normal. Spring arrived, and with it came the end of snow season. I spent my days working on long-term planning, training programs for new operators, and community outreach. The Lakewood Estates HOA held elections, and George Fletcher was officially elected president. He implemented new policies focused on community building rather than enforcement, and several residents commented that the neighborhood felt friendlier and more welcoming. I never saw Patricia again. I heard through neighborhood gossip that she sold her house and moved to Arizona, ironically to the same retirement community where the Hendersons had relocated. I hope she found peace there and learned that communities thrive not through rigid enforcement of rules, but through respect, communication, and understanding that we are all just trying to live our lives the best we can. One Saturday morning in May, I was outside planting flowers in my front yard when Tom Patterson walked over with his kids. "Hey, Derek, we are having a neighborhood barbecue next weekend. You should come. Bring Stephanie if she is around." "That sounds great," I said. "I will be there." As Tom and his kids continued their walk, I looked around at the quiet street, the blooming trees, the well-maintained homes. This was what a community should be. Not perfect, not without occasional disagreements, but fundamentally built on the idea that neighbors look out for each other, support each other, and give each other grace when life gets complicated. I finished planting my flowers, put away my gardening tools, and went inside to make lunch. Through my kitchen window, I could see kids riding bikes, couples walking dogs, and someone a few houses down washing their car. Just a normal Saturday in a normal neighborhood. And that was exactly how it should be. The restraining order remained in place for the full 2 years without incident. Patricia never attempted to contact me or return to the neighborhood. The HOA continued to function under George's leadership, with a focus on maintaining common areas and organizing community events, rather than policing minor violations. My daughter Stephanie graduated from the University of Minnesota and got a job with the State Environmental Agency. She moved into her own apartment in St. Paul, but still came over for dinner every few weeks. We would sit on my back deck, grilling burgers and talking about her work, my work, and whatever else came to mind. "Dad, I still think about that whole HOA situation sometimes," she said one evening. "It is crazy how someone can convince themselves that they are doing the right thing even when they are clearly hurting people. People get invested in their beliefs," I said. Patricia spent years building her identity around being the person who maintained standards and protected the community. When that got challenged, she could not handle it. Her whole sense of self was threatened. "Does not make what she did okay," Stephanie said. "No, it does not. But understanding why people do things is important, even when we do not excuse their behavior." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. It had been 3 years since that morning when Patricia called the cops on me for shoveling snow. 3 years since a simple act of clearing my driveway to get to work had spiraled into police reports, HOA meetings, legal proceedings, and a restraining order. Looking back, I realized that the situation had taught me important lessons about standing up for yourself, about the importance of community support, and about how positions of even small authority can corrupt people if they lose sight of their purpose. The city of Minneapolis made some changes too. After my experience, the city attorney's office developed new protocols for supporting city employees who faced harassment related to their work duties. They created a liaison position between the city and various HOA boards to help navigate situations where city operations might conflict with neighborhood rules. And they established clear guidelines about when the city would step in to defend employees against frivolous complaints or harassment. I eventually received a commendation from the mayor for my handling of the situation, and for my years of dedicated service to the city's snow removal operations. The mayor even joked during the ceremony that I deserved a special award for maintaining professional composure while being arrested for the crime of shoveling snow. As for the neighborhood, it thrived. Property values actually increased under George's leadership, not because of strict enforcement of petty rules, but because the community became known as a welcoming place where neighbors looked out for each other. The annual neighborhood barbecue became a beloved tradition. The HOA started a community garden in the common area, and when new residents moved in, they were greeted with welcome baskets and genuine friendliness, rather than covenant handbooks and violation warnings. I stayed in my house on Maple Drive, continuing my work with the city through multiple winters, each one bringing its own challenges and storms. Every time it snowed, I would wake early, shovel my driveway, and head to the operations center to coordinate the complex dance of plows, salt trucks, and crews that kept Minneapolis moving. And every time I scraped that shovel against my driveway in the early morning quiet, I thought about that February morning when Patricia called the cops. I thought about how something so simple and necessary had turned into such a complicated mess. But I also thought about how the community came together in the end, how reasonable people stood up against unreasonable treatment, and how the system, however imperfectly, eventually worked. The restraining order expired after 2 years as scheduled. I never heard from Patricia again. Sometimes I wondered if she ever thought about what happened, if she had any regrets, or if she still believed she had been right all along. I hoped she found happiness in Arizona, perhaps even reconnecting with the Hendersons and realizing that rigid rules matter less than human kindness. Years passed and the incident became neighborhood legend. New residents would hear the story and laugh in disbelief. "Wait, she called the cops on you for shoveling snow. That is insane." And longtime residents would shake their heads and say, "You should have been here. It was quite a time." I eventually retired from the city after 25 years of service. My retirement party was held at the operations center, attended by dozens of current and former employees, city officials, and even a few residents from Lakewood Estates who wanted to thank me for my years of keeping their streets clear and safe. In my retirement speech, I talked about the importance of public service, the satisfaction of doing work that directly helps your community, and the privilege of leading teams of dedicated professionals who go out in dangerous weather conditions to keep people safe. But I also talked about that February morning and the strange saga that followed. I talked about how it taught me that doing your job with integrity and standing up for yourself matters. I talked about how communities are stronger when people are reasonable, compassionate, and willing to question authority when it is abused. I never thought that shoveling my driveway would become a defining moment in my life, I said. But it taught me important lessons about justice, community, and the courage it takes to stand up against unfairness, even when it comes from positions of petty authority. I am grateful to everyone who supported me during that difficult time. And I am grateful that I live in a city and a country where individuals have rights that cannot be trampled just because someone with a title says so. The crowd applauded, and several people came up afterward to share their own stories of HOA conflicts or encounters with people who abused small amounts of power. It seemed that my experience had resonated with more people than I realized. I sold my house in Lakewood Estates a few years into retirement, not because of any bad memories or lingering issues, but because I wanted to downsize and travel. Stephanie helped me pack up 20 years of belongings, laughing at some of the things I had saved. "Dad, why do you still have the laminated HOA violation notice that Patricia gave you?" she asked, holding up the document. "Evidence," I said with a smile, "and a reminder that sometimes the smallest conflicts teach us the biggest lessons." "You are such a sentimentalist," she said, but she was smiling too. I moved to a condo in downtown Minneapolis with no HOA and no rules about snow shoveling times. I traveled to national parks with Stephanie, spent time with old friends, and volunteered with a nonprofit that helped refugees navigate their new lives in Minnesota. Looking back on my entire life, I am proud of many things. The improvements I made to the city's snow removal systems that saved lives and kept commerce moving during brutal winters. The teams I built and mentored over the years. The way I raised my daughter to be strong, independent, and compassionate. But I am also oddly proud of how I handled that strange conflict with Patricia and the HOA. I stood my ground without being vindictive. I used the system appropriately to protect myself without trying to destroy someone else. I accepted support from my community and my employer, while acknowledging that Patricia was a human being who had lost her way rather than some kind of monster. In the end, that is what community means. Not perfect agreement or rigid enforcement of rules, but a willingness to work together, give each other grace, and stand up for what is right when someone forgets that we are all just neighbors trying to live our lives with dignity and respect. The morning I cleared snow at 6 and had the cops called on me was the beginning of a difficult chapter. But it was also the beginning of understanding that sometimes the universe puts you in challenging situations precisely because you are the right person to handle them with integrity. And while I would not want to repeat the experience, I would not trade the lessons I learned for anything.